How many times she said
I was at her house. I went to her house. We went to her house.
no.
Right.
Someone
Yeah, we can move this if you want. We can move this if you
words are so hard sometimes. You can sit down.
So it should stay here.
People from IG and sit down over here.
We have like one
We're with this question because that one got taken. Oh, this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which one you guys taking?
Yours. Small.
I've never spent New Year's with this money. I didn't even bring bills. I'm just gonna carry on.
Yeah, this will be tomorrow night. She got it. It's like.
Oh, nice!
Should be tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Where did you go?
Yeah, thanks. They're in the back. I really get that a lot. Oh, the hair. Oh, I did it myself. Because like I did it for like 10 minutes for it to get to this Yeah. But if I don't, do it, I'll do it. But I only took the end, so I got like cut it off.
Grab a couple.
Thanks. I need the password of the Wi-Fi that is connected. Thank you. Can you send me? No, you know what? It is working. Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Hey, what? All right, everybody, be quiet, listen up. We're about to get started. I'm Natalie, for those of you who don't know. I'll be your room chair for today. You guys ready for Q&A? Yeah. Alright, so just to give you guys, I'll let you know the order. So for us, the order is going to be Kim, Tu-Hong, Dom, and then Karan. Okay? Can you repeat that? We're good? Kim, Tu-Hong, Dom, and Karan. So now I'm going to go over the rules and expectations of our room. Okay, so there will be 4 rounds of 20 minutes each. There will be a 5-minute break between each round. However, you must stay in the room during those breaks. You are not allowed to leave the room at any time. There will be a break, though, between rounds 2 and 3, where you may leave the room briefly. However, it is still discouraged for you to leave the room. It's just like for emergencies if you have to go to the bathroom. But during those breaks, you can stand up and stretch and that kind of stuff, and talk to your LCs, because that can be a good time to kind of reconvene again as an LC to brief the questions. You may not ask repeat questions, and that's up to my discretion. If I feel that a question is too similar to one that's already been asked, I will tell you that question cannot be asked, and we will move on to the next candidate. You will have used up your turn, and you will not get to ask another question instead of that one. We'll just move on to the next one. Questions will be read by LCPs in alphabetical order. So we will go down the list this way, right to left, for me, right to left, starting with Niels and going down. And it will go with as many cycles as time allows. So if on the first round we end with Matt, the next round with Tuhong will start with Nick. Does that make sense? So we'll just pick up where it left off. So you guys should all get an equal time to ask questions throughout the entire thing. And you'll have no more than 60 seconds to ask your questions. 60 seconds is a long time, but just so you know, I will cut you off at 60 seconds if you. And the note on that is that the longer you spend asking your question, the less time total that you have to ask questions for the candidates. So try to keep them concise questions for the candidates. I will cut you off. If you do not have a question, you are allowed to wave and pass your question on to the next person. Candidates have an indefinite amount of time to think about questions once you ask them, and they may ask one clarification question. That does not take away their answer time, just so you know. They're allowed to ask you to repeat the question or to clarify on something. And that's an either or, so they can only use one of those per question. And then as soon as they start talking again, their 2 minutes starts from the first spoken word. Then that does not include the clarification question. Candidates will be warned if they so choose with 30 seconds and 1 minute time cards. And any candidate may not speak negatively about another candidate, so please avoid asking questions that would put other candidates in a negative light. No one besides the LCP asking questions may speak, so only the people in the first row have speaking rights. Everybody else may not speak at all for the next couple hours. If you need to communicate something, yeah, it's true. Except for the 5-minute breaks that I'll tell you about. If you need to communicate anything, please pass it up through a note. But please be quiet about that as well. It can be distracting for candidates, and we want to make sure we use our time most efficiently. And we will cheer, kind of like we did yesterday, for all the candidates when they enter the room. We'll all stand up and we'll clap and we'll yell LCP, and then with lots of excitement, and then I think we'll end it in the same way with the 1, 2, 3, when they enter the room. There was something else. Is there any questions on any of that right now? And I would like you to all take out your cell phones and turn them on silent, please, to make sure that we don't have any interruptions. And then please put them away in your bag. I do not want any cell phone usage during this time. Okay. All right, so we're about to get started because it's here. And I will cut the candidates off, and I will cut you off just by saying stop when the timer goes off, and you will have to stop. All right, so can everybody please stand up? Oh, also, just a side note, this room will have the live stream at some point, so just keep that in mind. Alrighty, so on the count of 3, we're going to cheer, and then we'll do a 3 claps and go. Okay? Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, Tim, I got it. You good? Yeah. We'll get started. Would you like time cards at the end of each question or no?
I think that'd be nice. Let's try it first.
Okay.
How it works. Yeah.
Okay. Also, I will tell each of you, I have to give you the right to speak, so I will call on you when it's your turn, okay? Do not speak until I say you can. I am law in this room. I'm going to do my timer set up. Okay. So the first question will go to the MC, and you may start now.
Kim, congratulations on the application. We believe leadership is the fundamental solution. What is the leadership that young people in the US need to develop, and how will you go about doing that in your term?
Okay. So for me, the leadership that I want to develop for young people, not just in the US, but in the world, is the kind of leadership where people aren't afraid. And that's something I talk about a lot in my speech yesterday, is that fearlessness. But what is that fearlessness from? I think it's the main thing to talk about. Because I think we all want to be fearless, but what makes us fearless? I think it's when you start to approach situations already knowing that you can fail, and that like failing means learning. That's what success is, right? Like learning. And then you approach situations and you start to like understand, okay, this is why these problems, these things exist. Well, now what am I going to do about it? That's the key. That's what I want to build. I want to build a generation of leaders who are going to see the problems, they're going to think about it very deeply, they're going to make the connection, because solving these complex problems of the world, there are no simple solutions. There's not one solution. There are multiple. They make those connections and then they start to act fast. They mobilize people. Because they're not afraid of the failure. What am I going to do about it? So I want to implement the leadership development model that AI has created for the US. So it can't just be like an empty model. Well, it's not an empty model, like it's a great model, but what it is very generic. And it's generalizations of what can happen. So I want to like start to look, okay, what makes a leader in the US successful? What makes leaders in AIESEC successful? And then implement things like in combining that with what the foundations are to create the leadership development model that's going to work for the US. Like taking into consideration what American students like, what our education system is like, and what our environments are like.
Miami?
Hi. So we along with the rest of the MC counties are in the MC and we're in the MC because of your passion. So what are two things that you would say that set you apart from the rest of the MC candidates?
Okay. So there are two things. Like the very first thing that I think that sets me apart is, like before that, I think all of you guys, this is pretty obvious when you're listening to our when we talk and when you read our applications, is that a lot of us the four of us have very similar like strategies. Those things are pretty similar. Why are they so similar? Because these are answers that came out of conversations and things that we've done as an MC. But what makes me different is how do you get to those answers? I ask the questions in the team, and I do things, and I stretch people so they come to the answers themselves. Right? So I might not always have the answer or provide the answers, but I can help people get there. And the other thing that makes me different is, yeah, I haven't been LCP. I think the other three have been LCP. But I think that it creates like a different learning and a different challenge for me. And I take it really personally. Like I will work harder to learn the things that I haven't experienced. But otherwise, like additionally to that, I really understand how to work with teams of people because I haven't been in a position where I was that LCP. I can't describe this, but I think that it provides me with a different experience and a different perspective. And my leadership style is different. I'm not always the first person to say anything, or the first person to say something in the room, not like the loudest person. But when I do say things, it's because I know it's really important, it really matters.
So first off, great job thus far. However, the question would be is, if you had to choose one, which part of your platform would you consider the weakest link? And by weakest link, we don't mean most ambitious, but rather most likely to fail or be negative as to us.
Okay. So like in the platform, my platform, there's 3 levels. And I think I based it on like the golden circle. Everything starts with individual and leadership, and it builds into a culture of performance and excellence. And to like make that all work, our organization has to be fast enough. Our organizational agility has to exist. In terms of what has the potential to fail, I think all of them have the potential to fail, but I think the one that I would talk about now, I think is that culture, performance, and excellence. Because what is excellence? What is performance? Those things need to be defined very clearly, and they have to link to the other two. If they don't think, then we're in the same environment where we're just pushing people to do exchange. We're giving them like the hows, but not like the why, and thinking itself. But like when you talk about performance, you talk about behavior, you talk about like how people approach situations, you talk about things that's very, very complex. It's not mechanical. That's where I think that it's also the biggest challenge. Bringing that to this entire organization that spans like the entire country, where people are really different from each other, with like different backgrounds. How can you unite people with this performance culture that's excellent? What is that definition?
First off, Kim, congratulations on getting to this point. First question is, how do you plan on, as you mentioned this week, how do you plan on nationalizing and expanding the AIESEC brand, getting it to the point where on the university level, city level, that
Can you repeat the question?
so how do you plan on nationalizing the AIESEC brand to get it to a point of national recognition?
All right. Okay, so I think this is ultimately the core of what this question is. It's a PR question, and I studied PR in college. And one of the story that I'm going to tell is I was actually, when I was first elected as MCVP, I went to ILC, Ibero-American Leadership Congress in Mexico. And I had a chance to talk to the AIVP PR. And we were talking about relevance in the US, because that's such a big challenge for us. We're always talking about that, like how can we be more relevant? And she said, when you are doing things that matters, relevance will come, right? So focus on those things first. So in that perspective, will we really be relevant until we're so powerful that people are coming to us and we have a voice? Does that make sense? I'm not sure I can answer that question. Sorry. Okay, but in terms of, if you're looking for action steps, so like that's like the base of what I think about external relevance. Like, are we doing enough to be relevant? But if you're looking for action steps and what we can do, it really depends on the program you're working with. Like if you're working with OG relations, it really depends on like the school. I was talking to the SoCo region earlier, and I think for a school like Miami, since they're in a bigger like city, the people they need to talk to are going to be different because their challenge is to be so relevant that they can compete with like all the other internships in that market. So then maybe they need to do what they need to do is then get credit for their internship programs. That's different than maybe what App State needs to do, where they need to get credit like external relevance and endorsements from organizations like Teach for America, so that they can expand to different like markets, since their market is smaller. Okay? And then for like schools like UGA, since it's like university based, it's like a big like public school, and maybe where they need to go is then to departments, specifically different departments, because then they need to learn how to make that really big campus smaller. You can't just like attack everything at the same time.
Okay, so how will you drive growth in lower performing LCs while still maintaining growth in higher performing LCs?
Okay, so I don't know if I can like really fully answer this question in 2 minutes. But the first like two things that comes to my mind is first like focus, and second is that innovation, that idea of innovation. And the first thing, and the reason why I think these two things are connected is I really don't like the idea of innovation being something that's very blanket. That's something that's going to encompass everything, because innovation comes from a local level. It's very much like innovation in operation. On the national level, it's innovations in our products. It's like that innovation is different. The innovation that's necessary for like a performing LC, a low performing and high performing LC is different. And then the same thing with focus. So what I think is for low performing LCs, because they need to focus to grow from the local level, that innovation that they need to incorporate is how to get their processes to move faster so they can do more and build structure. And with focus, they're focusing on one program. Whichever one is most relevant to their market, that's the easiest for them to convert. They focus on that. And then with LCs that are already performing, maintaining it also means not decreasing, right? So that innovation then is more about how can they innovate from the local level up. That's when like the knowledge base isn't at the top anymore. The knowledge base is now with every member. So now members can innovate locally. So and that comes from then like investment strategies. So when they invest the strategies then for the focus will be more about where they can invest in multiple programs. But I really think that the RSC structures and what it is right now with the regional focus will really help implement this. Because these people can really understand what's happening per region. They're really understanding what's happening per market. Because right now, the 11 of us are trying to manage the entire country. And we might know a lot about our program. We can't know everything about everything, every person, every function, every LC. So with the RSTs, they can see it from that perspective. We just need to give them that direction. That's like almost a consultancy point of view, but they're giving LCs different kind of resources and strategies.
So in your opening speech, you were talking about adapting your own leadership based on what else you want. My question for you is, how exactly would you adapt your leadership? How exactly would you adapt your leadership based on the changing interests of the LCs?
Okay, so at the core of my leadership style is I believe in path-goal leadership. And I think it's pretty obvious. I believe that as a leader, I help the country set the goal. This is where we want to go. But instead of like setting the path directly, I want to help you, I want to work with you to set the path. So either you remove the obstacles or you break the obstacles, right? Like go around it completely or just smash through it. But I know that kind of mentality and that like kind of leadership style doesn't work for everyone. So the way I can adapt that is to be more situational. So I am helping LCs, like, okay, like Kim, I know you're right, but this doesn't make sense. I mean, I know you're right, but I don't know what to actually do. So in those situations, I will adapt. So I am more like, okay, so this is, these steps are like what you need to do. Let's try to do this first. So I can give more direction. The direction will be different. But it's very situational. It really depends on what's happening at the time. And I think I have enough experience to adapt to any situation.
Hi, my question? Thank you. So my question is relating to just like risks that come about with any kind of exchange programs or just like visas and like all different things that we need in order to be able to function properly. So let's say like, for example, a university that's is in a situation where they get shut down by a university because of risk management or something like that. And like other universities hear about it and then it becomes a huge problem. Like how would you react to something like that?
I don't know, this is not really a clarification question. I think the question that you should be asking is not how would I react to it, is how can I prevent it? Is it okay if I answer that question? Since like it's happened in the past, like it's proven that like universities will shut down LC. So the very first thing like I'm going to do, and I actually already started doing it. So I'm currently on NCM in charge of the NCB, the National Control Board. And what we used to do is very reactive. We just like, okay, so when people go abroad, they have a bad experience, then they tell us, they complain to us, and we fix it. But then like that, like once you, even if you fix it, that already happened. So I want to be more proactive about it. So right now I'm gathering data. I'm gathering information about which universities, like where can't they send people, and I have that information. Who are their advisors? So I have that information. Like what are the policies they have in risk management and insurance? So we have that information. Something else I really want to do is for us to start communicating with those university like sponsors, because I think they're like a big part. They're a big stakeholder of ours that we're not talking to. Like the people that are in charge of your like RC. I don't want to start talking to them. Maybe there's a newsletter, maybe there are conversations, maybe we invite them to stakeholder meetings. They are stakeholders. We haven't really explored that.
Okay. So what do you think was the source of problem that made AIESEC US not being able to reach some of the performance goals? And how would you improve or fix the problem, source of the problem to prevent that and achieve better results during the
Okay. So AIESEC US has all the resources that anybody could ever ask for. If you look at the national budget, like what Patrick projects is that we're going to make $2 million next year, right? $2 million. What nonprofit, an AIESEC organization, an entity in the world makes $2 million while doing only 750 exchange? We have the resources, we have the structure, we have the university students. We need to be better at recruiting people for competency so they're already in positions where they're already going to be good. But that's not the problem. So the problem is people. The problem is how we're developing these people, how we're getting people in, how we're developing them, what's happening and why they're here. And then right before they leave, what are we doing? Leadership right now is not very intentional. To answer your question, I think the very core of the problem is leadership. We're not focusing on that. It's not an intentional thing. It's very much like a byproduct. But it should be intentional. Because all the resources are there. People just have to take advantage of it. And I think that really starts with the way I will communicate, the way I work with the LCPs, and the way I work with my MC to push them to really understand this. Once they understand it, everything they do will be along that path.
This will be the last question of this round, MC.
Okay, you speak about organizational agility. What does that truly mean? What is your goal, and how will you make it happen?
All right, so I'm kind of want to make a joke about Pokemon here, but I won't at the same time. But organizational agility, what I really mean, okay, I really just mean honestly, I want us to be able to move at the speed of opportunity. That might sound cliche, but imagine if people are getting access to the internet 100 times faster. If we can expand virtually to more universities than ever without even that much work. But if we get 1,000 applications and we're converting 15% of it, what is it that we're doing, right? And with organizational agility, it breaks down to 3 parts. The first part is in our strategy. The strategic part is for everybody. Leadership, that developing strategies that's making us faster. And then there's the operations, that's where the LTs are coming from. So it doesn't take you 6 weeks to recruit members anymore. It takes you 4, it takes you 3, it takes you 2. That's where it comes from. And then there's the portfolio aspect. So we're expanding our portfolio. So if it happened that Apple is opening up a random kind of in Madison, maybe 50 of them, and they're hey, AIESEC, can you do it for us? How can we do that? We can't even sell it to them in the first place. We don't have a portfolio specifically for marketing. It's just one portfolio of IGN. So to answer your question first, it has to be a development in the way we see our products. And so be very clear about what we're actually doing per program. What are our sub-products defined? The second thing is I see an OD model that incorporates all of these things. An organizational development model that's going to help LCs plan for 5 years. Every year they're getting a little bit better. It's incremental. And it's going to in the strategies and operations. But I think it's also in the way that these sessions will be, when you come to these conferences, it won't be this is how you do this, this, and this. These sessions will be, this is the problem right now, how can you get the solution? Make a solution, let me feedback you. I think that's how you get faster. I don't think it'll be easy, but I think it'll be fun. I really think it'll be fun.
That's it. Please give it up for Kim! During these breaks, I just want to make a note that try not to be too loud so that we can make sure that other rooms aren't disturbed if they're not finished or they're finished later. Cool? The next candidate will be too hot, just so you know.
Like, we were like, change I realized that I went and I just wanted to find it right then and there before she has to come. What do you say for her now? I figured like, she was doing the work, then I can explain my politics. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, I don't be taking that.
All right, everybody take a seat. AIESEC!
Hey, what?
Please take your seats. Now stand up. What you have your seat? All right. So, Tuhan will be our next candidate. So please start cheering for Tuhan.
So what's the biggest bottleneck you see for AIESEC US? And how did you end it with your experience that you have at MC?
So I know I'm MCVPTM, but even if I wasn't, I would still say this as the same bottleneck. But I think our biggest challenge for growth is our talent. And this was a huge part of my platform about why AIESEC United States sees holistic member experiences and achieving results as separate things. When in fact, these two things are incredibly intertwined. These things, I've had amazing member experience, but I haven't been, handheld and fed in only fluffy things about AIESEC. That's what people think when they think, oh, I need to focus on my member experiences. That means that I don't challenge them. But without challenging them to achieve results, they're not going to have a transformational experience, a global leader experience that AIESEC provides them. So you can see, like, in pursuit of achieving the results you want, you have to utilize your talent because those are the people who are on the ground. Those are the people who are going to face your customers and make exchange happen. And in order to do that, you really need to know how to manage them well and tap into your talent and see talent management not just as TM's thing and that it's fluffy on the side and it's separate from exchange, but you have to bring these two things together. I think that's AIESEC US's biggest bottleneck, and it's almost like a mindset that people think that they can't have both. And that's the AIESEC United States. I want to lead that change, and I want to see that happen for AIESEC US.
So to start off, great job. And my question is, if you had to choose one, which part of your platform would you consider the weakest link? And by weakest link, we do not mean the most ambitious, but rather the part most likely to fail or be negative to AIESEC US. Thank you.
I think, so this is something I'm really passionate about, and I have a lot of fears about putting it into my platform because I think it has a lot of chances to fail. But it's the fact of utilizing our regions and our RCs and having regional support teams, because this means a lot of effort, and we're making steps to make it happen next semester, but it would carry on into my term. It means a lot of effort to support this change in AIESEC United States, where it's not just these 11 people in New York City making the strategies for AIESEC US, but we're customizing our coaching and customizing our support and looking at the markets that our LCs are in and giving members the training and the support on the regional level by utilizing their RCs and having these people and RST teams members under them, and having these people travel to LCs, give training, help LCs create customizable plans for their LC based on their reality. But of course, this means that it's a strategy that has high impact, but it's also a lot of effort, high effort. So that's why I see it probably being the biggest change that AIESEC US would have to see, and that there's a lot of chances for risk of failure. But I really want to move away towards just the MC crafting AIESEC United States and growing AIESEC United States. I want it to be more localized and bring customizable support and training to our regions through these regional support teams.
First off, congratulations on getting to this point. Coming from a Midwestern LC, how do you tangibly ensure that the Midwestern LCs actually have growth and expansion when we do not have the same population size as other cities, as New York, LA, that get mentioned so often in AIESEC terms as far as growth? So how do you ensure that Midwestern LCs continue to grow and expand?
I think our new membership model supports what I see being an opportunity for all of our LCs to grow. It's about playing to your strengths. So an example is my LC where I came from. My home LC is AIESEC Appalachian. And the way it used to be before, when we had to do 2-and-2 exchanges, we would not exist today if that still happened. But since we exist today, we're one of the top performing OGX teams. And that wouldn't have happened if the National Plenary were brave enough to make these changes to let people play on their strengths. So no matter where you are, even in the Midwest, or even if you come from a small town, the way my LC was too, it's about looking at your resources and looking at your market and what are the opportunities that are unique to you that maybe other people don't have. So just coming from a small town, the market that we were in, we weren't in New York City, you know, we didn't have all the resources possible, but we had students who had never been abroad before. And we were one of the only organizations on our campus that were so dynamic and could send students abroad at an affordable rate. And so we targeted students who wanted that adventure, that were from small towns that would probably never get the chance to go abroad, like ever, if it weren't for AIESEC. And so that was our strength, even though we have resources, people who tend to have a smaller, like conservative mindset, but we targeted the people who wanted to get out of that town and to experience more and come back and be leaders in their community. And so that's how we grew, we were able to grow, because we played on our strengths and what was unique to our market and aligns AIESEC's value proposition to what the people in our community wanted. And that's what I want to see for all LCs, to begin looking at what's so unique about your market and what can I capitalize here, instead of waiting around for national strategies, breaking the rules, making your own rules and seeing how can I grow and exchange here? What makes my market so relevant?
Here.
Okay, so when we're looking at the NST changing to the RST, and for the purposes of creating a stronger region, it seems like national conferences are now the only opportunity that LCs from different regions have to collaborate. So in what ways do you see yourself and your team facilitating collaboration between regions?
I think what's so great about the RC structure is that there will be someone on the MC team managing the RCs as well. So there's people who are working with the RCs to collect what's happening in our regions. How can we bring out what's best and happening from, West Coast and Northeast East and Gulf Coast, and bring all these things together, these GCPs, and share it amongst our network. So we can start showcasing things that come from the bottom up. And I see that as the role of the MC, being able to facilitate LCs across regions. And so right now, we currently only also have our national conferences. So that part wouldn't necessarily change in terms of why if the NSB structure changed. It's still only national conferences where we get these touch points. And so I think it's about the MC taking a bigger role by embracing grassroots efforts and being the ones to facilitate this GCP sharing and even bad case practice sharing and seeing what we can learn from each other. In cases where one LC shines or one region shines, what can we learn from it so we can apply here? That's something I saw that happened really well when I was in AIESEC Appalachian in SoCo. We were able to grow so much in 2012 because we depended on each other and we utilized each other's strengths. That's something that could easily be done on a larger scale for the entirety of AIESEC US.
So from your experience of revitalizing that state, what is one thing from that you can bring to your role as MCP?
I think the biggest thing I learned from my experience on the local level was how important it was to manage my talent. I know I always say this, I promise it's not just because I'm NCBPTN. But when I was in AIESEC App, between the semesters of my first term as VP IJP and my first semester and second semester, all of my members dropped and quit. And I had to learn, why is this? And it was because I pushed them so hard. I kept pushing them. And I didn't take the time to be the leader that they needed. I look at my leadership style and what are my strengths. I really believe that my leadership style and my personality and strengths is leadership as a host. So not someone who stands up in the front of the room and says, this is what you do this, everybody, or stands in the back of the room and lets everybody go crazy in front of them, but someone who can stand in the middle and invite people to collaborate and bring out the best in others so that we can all grow from each other. And so that's a skill that I learned, and I learned it the hard way, granted, at AIESEC App, but that's something I really want to embrace, leadership as a host, if I'm MCP. And I think AIESEC United States is ready for this. We saw it at SNC with the creation of the AIESEC US Manifesto. It wasn't something that came from the MC standing in the front of the room. It didn't come from the MC standing in the back of the room and letting LC saying, do whatever. It came from the MC standing in the middle and inviting LCs to come and collaborate and work with each other together to create something beautiful. And I don't think that can happen without a leadership style that enables that. And I truly believe that that's my strength.
Person? Right, so I believe that there are a lot of risks that are inherent in exchange programs, and for example, so that can happen and LCs could be shut down, and that could lead to a chain reaction to a lot of LCs shutting down. So I was just wondering, how would you deal with a major crisis like this?
Clarification, you mean with the new membership model being implemented? And
I mean, just let's say something like that happens in an exchange program, for example, and that we do a university shutting down. So how would you react to it in the crisis like that?
So I've been able to see specific cases where this has happened, such as AIESEC in San Francisco, which used to be a really thriving LC that had lots of traineeships, but then were shut down because of a case with their university. I think what's really important is for LCs, for us on AIESEC US to make sure we're coaching LCs that they have plans and relationships, that they're making relationships with their university. And so then they're not just signed up as a club, but that their university understands, we actually facilitate real exchange. And here are the risks that we face. And instead of saying like, this is something that could happen, working with your university together to say, how can we protect this for our students? Maybe there's certain countries your university doesn't want you to send students abroad. And unfortunately, if that's what it takes for AIESEC to stay on your campus, then you're gonna have to comply with what your university says. For example, if App State doesn't let students go to Colombia on exchange for school credit, but they said it's okay as long as we can prove that there's like insurance and something being taken care of on our side. And so it's about working with your university and in collaboration with them so that they understand the risk and how can we work together and see your university as a partner. You know, you bring value to their campus, and so there's no doubt that they'll want you there. And so how can we work together to mitigate those risks that could happen? And it's about being prepared beforehand. So now that we've seen it happen before with other LCs who've had to maybe take a step back and be more gingerly and careful with what they do with exchange, we can do to prevent it for other LCs. And that's what I mean about learning from each other. And learning from each other's maybe bad case practices and saying like, how can we prevent this from more people and set up more measures so that it doesn't happen again.
So you talked about you do have stages in your speech, and we're just wondering how would you create conflict environment that we can have people to have motivation to be first, not to have first, and then have other stages.
Do you mind repeating something?
Yeah, sure. So how would you create concrete environment where people have motivation to be first and do and have the resources, not the other way around?
Yeah, so this is a huge, we took this first initiative with the current MC to have LEAD. And LEAD is an initiative to give our members the mindset and the mental agility to have intentional learning so that they're able to face the challenges that they're going to face on the local level. And this is one thing we did. We brought in day dos, we have an external. And I think the next step that I would like to see in my term, and the changes that actually we'll be talking about more on the TM track this year, but that will continue in 2015 and 16, is how can LEAD be a companion throughout an AIESEC experience, not just a plug-in at a conference? How can I make a leadership experience for my members so that a leadership experience is throughout an entire experience? It doesn't have to wait to happen at a conference. How can we make leadership development intentional in all the touch points we have with our members? Is education just education, me standing up here at the board and talking at you how to do exchange, or do I make you get up and it's training and you do simulations and you get practice? That's leadership development, and that's what it means to have LEAD as a companion throughout an experience. Even simple things like applications, that's a chance for you to assess your strengths and weaknesses and learn what you're good at. Even that is like almost a small leadership experience, understanding what you're good at and applying it to what someone needs. All of these things, how can we make leadership development intentional throughout an entire AIESEC experience so people don't have to wait to come to a national conference to get that? And that's why I want to equip VPTMs on, but also the leaders of these functions. Every EB member needs to know how to make this happen for their teams. And maybe TM is the one facilitating that. But every TL, middle manager, VP, needs to make this happen for their members. Because if we're going to ask them to do more, then we have to equip them to be more, right? So we need to give them that practice and make it in a learning environment, an experiential learning environment throughout the whole thing.
Well, you changed the structure of the MC application to have BD and AD and the IGIP. Keeping in mind that the BD role, as we know, is slowly starting to expand beyond IGIP, what would you see this role be doing, and what were the thoughts behind this structural change?
Mm-hmm. So actually, this is the change I saw on my application that I actually want to change because we couldn't have more than 10 people and I had 11. So I know that if I had to take off a person, I would make this BD role turn into what I had on my team as a ER role. Because I see BD being so much more. And I see marketing, the person who's responsible for marketing, not being able to handle all the things that ER and public relations can make happen for AIESEC United States. And I know that this is something only the national level can really commit the time to doing. If someone's working full time of how we can get AIESEC United States and something like Time Magazine? And how can we have partnerships with organizations that do more with us than just take traineeships? They sponsor us for events, they appear, they talk, and train, and are a learning and development partner. So I see this being, if I were to dissolve a role on my team, which I needed to do for my original structure that I had proposed, it would be that ED would be part of an ER position. And that it would, exactly as you said, encompass more than just traineeships. It's about creating these major partnerships with organizations who care about our big picture and want to help us pursue it in any way they can. Because just like AIESEC, there's other organizations who can do more. Like we put on conferences, we do exchange, and we do learning and development. You know, like companies also can do the same thing, and we can work together to make those happen for each other.
All right, this will be the last question. Ryan? Wait, Michigan?
How do you plan on nationalizing the AIESEC brand?
This kind of feeds in from my answer for the last question. It's the reason why I wanted someone separate for the ER position. Someone that wasn't doing marketing or just doing IGIP, someone who can take care of our brands nationally. And so when it comes to centralizing the AIESEC US brand, I really think we need to start moving away from having so many different LC brands, because then it's like 40 people saying like we're AIESEC and it looks completely different from, you know, this LC looks different from this LC. So how can we adapt our website, our brochures, the things that we have so that it's the same for everyone, and that our brand is actually stronger on our campuses because people recognize it nationally. So you're actually able to do more as AIESEC US, you know, AIESEC, you know, in Miami or Mizzou, because people recognize it nationally. And this person would work on things like Y2B and events and PR and getting us publicated in major newspapers or magazines. And that's how people will see our national brands, and then LCs having that same brand within their local community. So I think it requires a standardization of what LCs are doing with the brands on their campus to be aligned with everyone else so that we can actually collectively have a stronger brand together.
Alrighty, give it up for Tuma. You may leave the room now if you need to use the restroom, but please only leave the room if it's absolutely necessary. Be back.
I was staring. That was like putting a hole in the background. You guys want to? Honestly, that was a big question.
The next candidate will be John.
Literally, that's so.
Hey, what? So, as you know, we are in that screen, so if you have personal comments about the candidates, please leave that zone and go out of the room, because that's all we know. So, please, think.
Is that it? Is it on?
Yeah.
Hey, everybody!
I really want to ask you a question. How I thought it was important. Did it sound like you? I know. But did it make sense like the way I asked? I see the difference in like for us, like it's different because it looks exciting, you know. It looks good, and I don't know how to different markets or culture, and that's trends out of West Africa. And also I question this work. Down to next, so I'm going to
Tom.
So, what do I want to use? We're going to start. Come back. 5:30 public speakers. So 5:30 is the yeah, so like after this, starting another hour. So you all are so I don't expect you guys to be more amazing because you're getting more.
No, I didn't bring them. I forgot. But if I did, I would. 3 inches is like my yeah. Oh yeah, I do that with all my heels. I'm so awkward in heels. Yeah. No, it's my first. Like, I know, right? I don't know how people are like falling asleep. right? Even the rocks. Even for rocks, I'm like so tired after the third day.
The rocks I went to left early because they thought it would be a snowstorm, so I really didn't even like get that. I got like the first day, but like everyone was super early that day because like it was like the first day being there. So
Yeah. It's a marathon. I'm Amy, by the way. Aaron?
yes, part of this whole thing.
What are you doing?
I'm thinking of BPA. So,
Oh, sweet.
what do you do?
I'm in GC. Who's your GCDP or OGX? Are they here?
No, why is that not?
Your DP GCDP?
Yeah, we just have.
I just should do that.
Is she here?
I swear short.
No. We're the only. Supposed to have two other girls. Yeah,
Might as well.
Yeah, we fasted together. We're not together, but like we're
In Missouri,
I would wonder that. I would think it's kind of like, where are they from? Why did they say Missouri? Like, I don't get it. Yes,
you don't call this. I'm from Missouri. I saw the university. No, that was the same on the two. The original name. Yeah, like
Okay.
Oh, like you don't call the state Missouri.
yeah.
U of M. We have an MS. Is that MS?
Winning? No, I lost.
Alright, everybody get ready to start straight for now. Stand up. Huh? Yes, the first question of this round will start.
Remember, keep clapping until Natalie says stop.
I think that doesn't really work very well, so I think we'll just, when I start going like that. Oh, no.
Gator clap.
You guys go first. Stand up.
They just be like,
Should I do
this wasn't Natalie Snell's on the
Oh,
They're like a
cat. That'd be so funny. You all watch the video. Who's that? Who's
Everything you guys are this
Guys ready? Please welcome your MCP candidate, Dominic! Alrighty, the first question of this round will start with New York City.
Okay, so how can LEAD become something that LCs can develop and not rely on the MC, especially with what we're doing now that's not really succeeding?
Okay, so yeah, just to clarify, I'm just going to kind of write down some of your questions throughout the process, so it takes me a second to write it down. So one thing I think about LEAD is that LEAD is like should be strategically pairing up with what we're trying to do. So nationally, when we're trying to change the mindset of AIESEC US, we were using LEAD to drive the fixed versus growth mindset. I think locally, if there's a degree of clarity in what's needed to be driven, and then you can identify how you can use LEAD, then you can start to either work with the TM responsibles for the MC to help develop it, or you can do external research and understand how you can create a LEAD program that's right for your local committee. But ultimately, I think that we're going to have a national direction, and there's going to be a national LEAD program that will exist, and that's something that we'll continue to do. But I think that, yeah, if you know what you want, you know what you need at your local level, then I think that's where you can start to identify the steps to take to make that into a local initiative.
In your opening speech, you were talking about virtualizing AIESEC. My question for you is, if AIESEC became virtualized, where would that lead to LCs?
Yeah, that's a good question. The way I think about it is not necessarily that AIESEC is a strictly virtual organization, but that AIESEC has a virtual reach. So the way I think about it right now is just like any other store, where maybe like Target's an example, where we have Target locations, all over the country, but there's also online purchasing. So if you're not near one, you can still buy it, or you could use a different service to get that product to you. So I think that having the physical location is important because I think that there's a lot to the interpersonal connections and just like creating those relationships, to have more sales and to have a greater physical reach, which will give you more brand recognition and just more presence. So I think that the LCs pair nicely into it. And it's less about virtualizing AIESEC and more about just increasing the scope of our operations and increasing the representation to more than just a university. So it's not just AIESEC at Northern Illinois University, but AIESEC in the United States.
So my question is, what kind of experience do you have with business development and engaging in this?
Cool. So with business development on the local level, I did some sales post my LCP term. So I worked mostly with Karen Chen, who was a very eager salesperson who didn't have a car in ISEC, Michigan. So I had a car, and it was like, I have experience, I can do sales. So I would go with her, and I basically played the color commentator. Like, she was like the keystone person. But since then, I think that my position, I deal with a lot of externals. I think Hans is the one who deals with more externals. I work with a lot of alumni when it comes to university relations, when it comes to expansions. So I work with key stakeholders in Boston and Los Angeles. So I put together a board of advisors over there in Boston of about, well, now it's about like 15 people. But that includes administrators from faculty. At Suffolk University, we work with the dean of undergraduate programs. So just to NGO consultants and stakeholders like that. So I think that I have a lot of exposure in working with externals, presenting ISEC to them. So like through example at Suffolk, I got a meeting with all the administrators at the university and got to make that happen. So I think the experience is there in a lot of different ways.
So, what kind of challenge do you think AIESEC US is facing right now, if there's any? And what experience or strength of yours can improve the situation?
So I think that right now one of the biggest bottlenecks in ISEC US is our dependency on using the past and past trends to develop the future of the organization. And I think that a lot of times we're blind to opportunities that exist before us. So I think that MC Beyond, the current team, we've been working and looking at what opportunities exist and how can we increase our operations, how can we see that, like how can we increase the conversions. So fluid review is one example of how we're currently doing that. So that's the kind of thing that I'd like to continue with my team in the future, is to just look at the opportunities that exist, look at the strengths that we have as ISEC, look at the resources, whether it's financial or human, that we can use to exploit those and to bring back more to the organization. I think that I have visionary leadership. As far as on our team, we did an exercise where we had to like label the parts of the car. So I was the headlight. So I'm the person who's looking out and seeing what's next and what can happen. So I think that that's something that I can provide to the future team, is what are the next steps and how can we use innovation to get there.
Now, congratulations on the application. Tell us about your expansion strategy. Would you expand AIESEC US, or would you choose to strengthen the current base? And either way, how would you go about doing it?
Yeah, I think to start off, I would say that it's not mutually exclusive. So I think that through actions such as university relations, that's one way that we can really strengthen chapters that currently exist. With expansions, I think it's important that we start to take more of a franchise-based expansion policy into effect, so that we can actually train the LCs on how to become fully operational in a short period of time, between 1 to 2 months, so that by the time that they've done with their training, they know exactly what to do and can operate one program. So the model will be breaking up into OGCDP, OGIP, and IGIP right now. And the training would be interactive, so there would be simulations, quizzes, elements that bring in the history of ISEC, which would be based on other industry practices and how they set up their expansions and their franchises. Because right now it makes sense. We start an IG, and we tell them to start from square one. When we already have processes in place, and we already have different things set up. But think about if you were wanting to start a Subway shop, and they were like, okay, figure out how to make a sandwich. We're like, welcome to Subway. Like, that doesn't make sense. And like, why do we do that? It's not a good business model. So I think having a franchise-based approach will be the first step. And once we have that standardized procedure, we can really drive that on a regional level, because we can train people for the RST positions, for expansions, and they can work with expanding the markets in the region and running those programs. And we can line this up with the national timeline as far as conference cycle goes, and we can standardize the education so we have a process and we utilize our catch points effectively.
Seeing that your current MC position and the expansions into Berkeley, Boston, and LA, do you have any plans on any expansion in Florida, seeing as the ISEC plans for the only MC in Florida, making it a little distant from the
And so I think this is also getting into the regional support team structure and some of the advantages of having it. I think that it becomes possible for somebody who's the RC of SoCo, like Cynthia, to look into how can we make more LCs in Florida? Like, do we need a university at University of Florida? Can we have an additional university in the Miami area, University of Miami? I think these are things that the RST could look into. And on a national level, I'm always more than happy to share any of my resources and any of the understanding I have as far as expansion goes. And to extend an offer to co-sales if it's virtually, because I might not always be able to like fly out to Miami with everything that's going on in my position at the moment. But I think that that's a big opportunity that exists, is like putting the power of expansions into the regional level so that we can strengthen our regions and connect them closer so we can kind of bridge that geographic gap that exists.
So first off, fantastic job with slides. I'm inspired. And my question is, if you had to choose one, which part of your platform would you consider to be the weakest link? And by weakest link, we do not mean most ambitious, but rather the part most likely to fail or be negative as the US.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult question. What we can accomplish and what we have yet to accomplish. And all the strategies and initiatives I put forward are, in my mind, directions and steps to take us to a higher future possibility. And I wouldn't put anything on the table that I would consider to be a substantial risk to AIESEC, because I think I care too much about this organization to see it fail based on my strategies. I think that a lot of the strategies, they have the possibility to fail initially, but I think that that's just part of prototyping and part of getting it right. So I don't expect my strategies to work 100% perfectly from the get-go. I think it's going to be an ongoing process of messing up a lot and making it better each time. But I would say I don't think any of them would be detrimental to AIESEC United States.
Well, congratulations on making it this far. My question is, you talk a lot about innovation, so could you please further clarify your personal definition of innovation, and then also give me a tangible example of what that looks like for local LCs as well as for the MC?
So yeah, so to talk about innovation, I see innovation as a strategic approach. So I see AIESEC US, and we have our current operations, and they're here. And what I see is we have our ambitions, and the ambitions are here. And so there's this gap right here, and that gap is filled by innovation. So that's how I see the innovation positions working in my structure. We have the person responsible for OGCDP, OGIP, and we have somebody for BD. And they're responsible for keeping up the current operations, for making sure that we're still performing at the level in which we're used to based on our current operations. Where the innovation comes in is filling that gap. So the innovators are doing specific tasks to exploit new opportunities for AIESEC US. In specific for ICX, what I'd like them to do is either explore different extensions of the J1 visa or other visas altogether, so we can diversify our products and have more experiences where we can bring people into the United States and reduce our dependence on the visa and on the global current, so we can become more of a sustainable organization. And hopefully with ICX that we can bring in people for short-term projects so that they can not only experience the United States, but they can have social impact here that aligns with the value of this organization, peace and fulfillment, human potential. Because I think right now it can be hard sometimes to see how IT and marketing internships fulfill that mission. And I think if we had another product that was closer tied with that, that'd be very helpful for our organization. I think on a local level, the idea going forward with this more of a regional approach is that we have more bottom-up innovation. We have that team of 1,200 members who are driving AIESEC United States. So AIESEC United States in the future is less about what does the MC want to do, and more about what are our LCs doing, and how can we support them, and how can we take the resources we have and innovate to help them. So I think innovation happens on a local level when you just go out there and you try things different and you share that. And I think with the regional structures, there's a great opportunity to work with the VPs, to work with the LCPs, and to share what's happening and shape the organization in a different way.
Okay, so referring to the alternate visa option, how would you look to actually implement these alternate visas into the operations?
So I think this would be the primary role of the ICX innovation person. So the first part of the job would be exploring different opportunities and then making sure that we can actually procure that. And once we're in the process of procuring it, and it seems like that's going to be the route going forward, the role would change. And so the role would become, how can we implement this? And how can we make this part of the ICX operations in the United States? And if the project is big enough, I think at that point, that person would be converted into the implementer for that. And I think the timeline is about a year. So I think a decent amount of time to get to that point, but they can start implementing it, and that could be reflected in the next structure.
Can you talk more about your broader approach to innovation and also, sorry, John, and also how you're going to instill this kind of behavior among us?
So I think one thing that I talked about in a previous just like informal Q&A with New York was that a lot of members, the way we currently learn is we learn from the past and what's happening. And that's like a behavioral thing that we have in AIESEC US. And the question was, how can you change that? And so that was where I said, I think we would be a great program to have that mental shift. Similar to how we switched from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, I'd love to have an external partner, whether it's Dave, whether it's somebody else, that could help us change that mindset. So we're looking at future opportunities and how to bring them to our local communities. And it fosters that culture of innovation and entrepreneurship that we want in AIESEC US. So I think that, I wouldn't be the perfect person for it, but I think we have the resources to get people who are trained and qualified to bring it to AIESEC US.
So how do you see yourself in AIESEC US currently, and then how do you see AIESEC US and yourself at the end of your term as AIESEC, and why do you feel so?
So I think right now I see myself and AIESEC United States as an organization that's transforming, as an organization that's going through a lot of changes. And I see AIESEC United States right now as a really exciting time to be a member in AIESEC because there's so much that's happening. And I think that there's more ownership in the local level now than there has since the whole time I've been in the organization. And I'd like to continue that into the future. And I think that the most important thing for me going forward is that the context of my team going forward won't be a one-year context. In the context of the local committees, we'll be building towards something. I think that each year we have an organization should be one step closer towards peace and fulfillment of human kindness potential.
Don, we believe that leadership is the fundamental solution. What is the leadership that the United States needs? And how will you go about developing that leadership?
So I think that one thing that I was talking about during the Smart Talks was the interpersonal connections. I think that we need to have our members interacting with alumni, interacting with people that are actually working in industry so that they can become the leaders that are aggressive and assertive enough to make opportunities. I think waiting for opportunities and being passive is something that has been part of what AIESEC has been doing since I joined the organization. We look for the supply and then we try to adjust to it. But I think the people who are wildly successful in the world are the people who make things happen. And I think that's the kind of leader that AIESEC United States needs. So I think that's what we need to develop, is we need to develop people who are willing to go out there and to make what they see, what they dream, a reality. So that's something that I would like to enable.
What would you consider the biggest bottleneck for AIESEC US right now, and how would you go about it?
So at the moment, in my assessment, I think the biggest bottleneck is that we've inherited a lot of structures and we've inherited a lot of positions that don't necessarily draw the bottom line of the organization. I think that, and this isn't the case for every local committee, but I think that a lot of our support functions aren't truly supporting the exchange functions in which they were developed to do. So I think that we have a lot of members and their role isn't clearly tied to the mission of AIESEC, or their role isn't really clearly tied to the success of the LC. And because of that, we have a lower member productivity rate. And I think because of that, we have a higher turnover rate in AIESEC. So I think that really connecting all the positions back to the core cause of AIESEC and to making sure that we're strengthening our TMP and TLP, and in doing so, creating more internships and creating more experiences for our exchange participants.
In your speech, you talked about university relations and your plans for that. With relationship management, how do you plan on stimulating those relationships with universities when there's yearly turnover for the MCP position, as well as consistent turnover in administration at universities? So how do you plan to make those relationships sustainable?
So I think the key to sustainable relationships is just a solid transition. I think it's something that we often don't spend enough time on, and we don't give enough attention to key stakeholders we have, and we often lose them. And I think that fits into a greater customer servicing strategy and just how we treat the people that we work with and the expectations we have for those relationships. And I think we can organize that better. We can have a systematic approach to it. And that's part of the reason why I want to have somebody for university relations is to start creating this behavior that will permeate down to the local level, and that we can test and we can see what works and what doesn't work. But just transferring that local connection. And I think that the thing that will ultimately set us apart would be the service that we provide to our stakeholders. And I think that people love our youth. I think that that's one of the things that makes us unique, is that we're a youth-run organization. And I think if we can charm them, if we can impress them by putting great things on the table, that relationship will maintain itself. And it'll be something that those people look forward to. So we just have to make sure that the back end is lined up and that we're actually transitioning those relationships.
So personally, what is your greatest fear or challenge that you foresee of being MCP, and how will you overcome that?
I think that, so something kind of funny we do in my local committee is when you're elected for LCP, the first thing that the predecessor says to you is don't fuck it up. It's their advice to you. And I think that that's my biggest fear, is that when you take a leadership position, you're leading the organization. So the worst thing you could do is fuck it up. So that would be the biggest fear that I would have, because I care so much about this organization and I love this organization so much. And I think that that's always the biggest fear you can have. But you don't have to be driven by your fear. Instead, I would rather be motivated by my sources of inspiration and the hope of this organization where I see it. And so I would rather look at the opportunities that exist and the vision that I have for AIESEC United States and how I can capitalize on that. And I think if I do that, I really can't fuck it up.
Last question, right now. Yeah. So how do you plan on increasing your visibility of the MC on a local level in a financially responsible way?
So I think that right now we're kind of reaching the threshold of MC being able to physically go out and reach different local committees. I think if we added 10 or 15 in the United States, that we just physically couldn't do it. There's not enough days in the year to go travel, to have conferences and have something like this. So I think it has to move away from how can the MC be more visible and how can the RSTs and these regional teams play a bigger role in shaping the regions and working with the LCs, and how can they bring that to the MCs so that we can manage them. Because I think that it's physically not going to be possible unless the board approves a lot more positions, which would be cool. I'd be down to have a team of 24 people. Patrick's giving me a look you just have to see it. But I think that, ultimately we have to gravitate away from having the MC be more visible and really having the LCs be more of the driving force behind AIESEC United States.
All right, let's give it up for Dom.
I know you sent me a question for Khan, so. But that was more about that. I think went back university explaining the rules, explaining how we're voting, and then we're gonna go to the whole preparation, and then we're gonna vote, and then that's so they're gonna tell us what to roll with.
I thought we were waiting for our New Year's Eve.
Good, I'm down.
If they were, I want to.
Otherwise, I'll just throw out Are you wearing your dress?
I like flat tech. For those. Are you wearing a suit or wearing just like a dress shirt? Sorry. Okay. See my suit fits me.
City. I usually play Clash. I deleted it. I lost my full game or whatever. Yeah, me and my friends made a plan. Oh, nice. Yeah, my ISIS score got super slow. I just upgraded. The full version. I want to get the score. Yeah, I know. It's like really simplified. I just have 62.
All right, please welcome our next candidate, Khan.
The first question, we'll start with Ohio State. You may begin.
Okay. So which relationship do you think is the weakest right now? And what I mean by like the relationship is like MC to MC, LC to LC, region to region, it can be anything. And how would you like to strengthen it? And how would you realize it?
So I'm assuming these relationships are just about AIESEC United States and how LCs and maybe the MC interact. Based on that assumption, I think the weakest relationship right now is LC to LC. And that's both within the region and outside the region. I think we have a really cool and fun time when we meet up at conferences or we visit each other. But beyond that, we are not really working as much as we could. And the reason why, I think it makes sense to work together is because at the end of the day, all the LCs are trying to do the same thing. And there are some that are doing a better job at one program or another. And for me, it would make logical sense for us to like work or like ask those individuals or ask those LCs that are doing a much better job in something to ask them, what are they doing well? How does that make, like, how is that working out? And similarly, when we often recognize LCs or recognize specific behaviors that worked out well, very few times do other entities actually approach them and say, okay, how did you make this happen? How did this work on me so that I can try and implement it as well? So I think if we did that, there would be a lot more, not only a lot more like LC to LC like conversations and like collaboration, but I think AIESEC United States would also move forward a lot more and grow a lot more.
MC?
Darren, congratulations on the application so far. You speak about faster education. How and by when?
Yeah, so I speak about faster education because right now, on average, it takes a really long time for our members to start delivering and for members to start performing. And that's a behavioral and a mindset change that I would like to see in AIESEC in the United States. And the reason why I think when I was a VP or even when I was LCP, I was expected that every member needs to go through all these 20 resources, needs to know every step of the process to be able to start delivering. But I don't think that's true. What I would want to do is for every program, every function, identify what are some key things that need to be delivered in the first couple of weeks for them to start performing, for them to start delivering, because that's when experiential learning happens, when they actually start doing things, right? And the way I would do that is also change our educational platform instead of just using Podio, which is a resources hub and not like an education center, to create more resources or more microsites like the OGIP Resource Center, which could literally be like an AIESEC US Resource Center and still have different functions. And the way I would like that to see, like it to work is you have videos, you have PDFs, you have files, because different people learn in different ways. And that's the biggest learning, and one of the biggest learnings I think I've had in my CDP term, where some people like videos, some people don't, some like PPTs, some don't. So like with the same resource, same content, have different ways in which you can educate them. But only have those 3 to 4 there. And after that, the others are resources. Okay, I got the basic information on how to go to a sales meeting. Now I want to learn about objection management. Click here. This is about education management. I want to learn how to raise a university partner. Click here. That's a resource. As opposed to just relying on you have to cover all these 20 items to be able to start raising an EP or matching.
How exactly would you go about expanding to external events such as TEDs, as you mentioned in your application, and what would be the specific actions?
Yeah, so one way in which we can be a lot more externally relevant is by increasing our presence at external events, which I mean like non-AIESEC events, not just AIESEC conferences. And one way of doing that would be at events that already exist, like TED and Ignite, for example. And the way moving forward is a lot of our universities already have TEDx events happening either at the university or in the vicinity. And what I would want to look into or come up with like steps, okay, you want to try and be at a TEDx event, what are the things that you have to do? Contact the organizer, try to create a partnership there. Because I think it would be really cool. We have such amazing experiences and amazing stories. How can we get people from AIESEC to be sharing those stories at these events? Because once we do that, yeah, maybe a lot of the audience is not our customer base, but that's okay, because then at least they hear about AIESEC. Maybe just an acronym thrown out that we have to explain every single time, even though we've been here for 60 years. But if we increase our presence at such events, and then we even at networking events, at chamber events, where yeah, I mean, maybe you're just going to just talk about AIESEC, and again, may not be your customer base, but people start hearing about this organization. And I would want to support LCs in this way. I would want to support LCs at a TEDx event to see what worked, what did not work. How are ways you can actually make that happen, as opposed to just saying, okay, it makes sense to do.
So first off, great job this far. And my question is, if you had to choose one, which part of your platform would you consider to be the weakest link? And by weakest link, you would not be the most ambitious, but rather the part most likely to fail or be negative to AIESEC US.
So I don't know which part would be the most negative to AIESEC US, because the intention for each of those parts is to have a lot positive impact. But if there was anything that I would have to let go, it would probably be the expansion strategy. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I would choose external relevance over increased expansion. And I would choose external relevance more because if we can be a more external relevant brand and organization, I think in the future, it'll be a lot easier to expand, and it'll be a lot easier to start things up in your entities, because people will already be aware of AIESEC and would want to have an AIESEC chapter at that local community. And that's the reason why I would probably remove that. But the other aspects about faster education, innovation, conversions, like all that, I think are really, really core to my platform, and I think that is really definitely required. And the only thing that I can see as the fifth priority would be expansion.
First of all, congratulations on coming this far. My question is, coming from a Midwest LC, how do you intend on helping Midwest LCs grow and expand when our markets are oftentimes not as large, not as adaptable, not as flexible as those that are often mentioned in these ones as New York, LA, etc. And again, clever is a tangible ways.
So I think even when we look at the Midwestern LCs, I don't necessarily feel that you don't have similar resources or similar markets. That's my opinion, coming from that region and also being part of Rowdy's West and Rowdy's East both, actually. So things that I would implement, yeah, most of those universities are still pretty decently sized. You have a massive university market. You have those students. In some cases, it's even better in the Midwest because they don't have other opportunities. They're not necessarily surrounded by a city where they can be doing a lot of different things. And that's where AIESEC makes more sense because you bring that value proposition for them, which helps them differentiate themselves. Right? One. Second, some of the Midwestern LCs are surrounded, are near solid cities. When you look at near Indianapolis, near Chicago, near Detroit. So in that sense, the corporate market, again, is not too small to be able to even conduct the same strategies that we deliver in other entities such as New York or Austin. And in terms of universities, as I said, even the others, you look at Mizzou, you look at Northwestern, Michigan, Ohio State, all of them have sizable university populations and sizable interest of people who would be interested in going abroad because they want to differentiate themselves.
How will you look to drive growth in lower performing LCs while still maintaining growth in higher performing LCs?
I think one of the most important aspects to make sure both kind of entities are growing is have strategies that are implementable actions that are different for both those entities. And not necessarily have the same strategy for, say, an entity that is doing 50, 60, 70 exchanges as opposed to an entity that is just starting out. And that would be my biggest differentiation factor. And so far, I think in general, most of our strategies are just catered in general. They're not very specific in terms of, okay, you're a low performing entity, these are the things that you should be doing. You're a high performing entity, these are the things that you should be doing. And I think if we are successful with the regional support team, I think we'll be able to get a lot more input in terms of these actions that are happening at these local LCs and see what parts actually work for a high performing entity or what else do they need. And once we can identify what the needs are of these different kinds of entities, we can develop not just blanket strategies, but also action steps that work for each of these kinds of entities.
So in your opening speech, you talked about cultural inclusivity. My question for you is, how do you think AIESEC US is relevant in increasing cultural inclusivity in the US?
I think AIESEC United States is very relevant, and as I said, probably one of the organizations that can make a massive difference in terms of cultural inclusivity in the United States. Why? Because look around you in this room. You have multiple people from different cultures, different countries, different languages in the same room doing the same thing. Once we showcase this, that's one way of showing that, yeah, we're actually making a difference. Second, you send someone abroad, you bring someone in. Not only are you making that person interact with people from different cultures, but once they come back, they have different mindsets, they have different awareness points, and they interact with their community. The number of times I've heard that someone who has never met someone's parents who never met someone from another country, and in turn comes in the university, they take them home. And that fundamentally makes a massive difference in just that family and the way things work. And that's beautiful, right? Because not only do you make an impact on yourself as a member of bringing someone in, and the person you're bringing in, but also your family and the neighboring community. So the more interactions that we can have, and not just awareness, so that's the difference. Not just awareness, but more interactions we can have with people from other communities is how we will make the United States a more inclusive community.
Can you talk about your greatest growth experience during your AIESEC journey?
Yeah, so it's in one word, or in 2 words, LCP experience. For sure, I think I grew the most as an individual through my LCP experience in different ways. One, I became a lot more self-aware. I became a lot more self-aware because I understood what are things that I'm good at and what are things that I'm not so good at. I got feedback not just from my team members and people that I was interacting with in the LC, but even outside Northwestern, through which I could learn. Second, I saw other people who I got inspired by. And I saw other people to see what are some things that they are doing and what are some attributes that I get inspired by. Because then I wanted to try and at least understand and learn those attributes. Third, I think I began to understand how organizations behave. And the reason, I think the biggest way that happened was in the first semester of our term, we were very results oriented. We were a very EV driven organization. And as a result, people got burned out. And people were like, yeah, we're just doing a lot. And then we evaluate. And then we evaluated to see, okay, what's going on? What's changing? And that's when we understood it's about organizational culture and not just activities and actions. And that's when we changed our mindset. We had like a massive LCM. We talked about what do people care about? What do people want to see in ISEC? And what happened, we expected, okay, maybe our results would reduce. But no, people were having more fun. People were liking that culture because that was the culture they wanted to be part of. And since they wanted to be part of this organizational culture, results actually happened. People were doing more because they liked the community they were part of. So I think beginning to understand that how organizations behave was probably one of my most growth experiences.
So what do you think is the biggest opportunity that AIESEC US can offer to our members? And how would you maximize the number of members enjoying the opportunity, thus increasing member satisfaction and retention?
I think the biggest opportunity that we provide to members, students, individuals is what we were talking a lot about in the Smart Talks, which is experiential learning. And that is a differentiating factor that we can provide to freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and sometimes even seniors, which they would not have got earlier. Now, the thing that we need to be careful about is that are we actually providing experiential learning? And are we actually developing them as leaders? And that's the thing that I would want all of you, especially sitting in this front row, whether or not I get elected as MCP or not, to evaluate and assess consistently, and not just at semester, but have more spaces to see, okay, are my members actually developing? Talk to EPs that went abroad or trainees that are coming here. Are we because of the experience that you're having, have you developed as a leader? And if so, how have you? And what has not worked and what has worked? And once you can extract those things on how people have developed, keep that in mind as you do your new recruitment as well as the members that are there. And that's what will not only make sure that you're understanding what works and what does not work, but you will learn how to deliver a better membership experience. And in terms of retention, it's about figuring out what people want. So they join AIESEC for this reason, and they want to do this. If that stayed, talk to them. Are we still giving you the right opportunities? And if that hasn't, if that's changed, figure out where they want to be. Can AIESEC still provide them an opportunity to get there? Can AIESEC still provide them skills, experiences, which helps them to be whatever best version of themselves they want to be?
Taran, you spoke about being culturally inclusive, but also mentioned that your expansion strategy would be at the bottom of the pile. How do you ensure that AIESEC is relevant in all 50 states of the United States?
That's the biggest reason why expansion is one of my focus areas is because I want an AIESEC United States that is truly representative of the United States. Right? Now, being at the very end, it doesn't mean that we won't be able to hit 50 states, but it would actually mean we could hit 50 states faster, but maybe not in the next year. But if we are more externally relevant, if we are doing more and innovating different ways in which people are aware about AIESEC and we know how to do AIESEC better, then in the future, by 2020, by 2025, we will be able to expand into a lot more places, into a lot more areas where AIESEC either had been in the past or can be in the future. And talking about cultural inclusivity, I think even if we had 10 chapters or 15 chapters, these 15 chapters could make sure that the United States becomes more culturally inclusive. Right? So just because we don't have an AIESEC chapter in Utah, it doesn't mean we can't virtually attract people from Utah to send them abroad. That does not mean that we can't create frameworks in which they get to experience AIESEC and we interact with them. If we had more conferences that were not just for AIESEC United States members, but were also open to people and students from other places, that is what will help us become a United States that is more culturally inclusive.
What is the biggest bottleneck you see for AIESEC US and how would you overcome it?
I think the biggest bottleneck for AIESEC United States is our nature at times to be complacent. Is our nature at times to be very easily satisfied. Because we are an entity that we keep saying is not doing enough. We keep saying that to ourselves, that AIESEC United States is not doing enough, not doing enough, not doing enough. So as a result, when we see a spark, when we see a spurge of growth, when we do a little more, we get very easily satisfied. And we feel like, yeah, we've become the best LC because we realized 5 training shifts. Or we became the best LC because in like 2 weeks you were able to match 15 and that's it. And now I'm satisfied. Now I'm like known about. And I think that behavior, is the biggest bottleneck of AIESEC United States. That being said, I'm really proud to say that this behavior has really changed. And what I see in the past 6 months, and I want to say even past year, is that it's reducing. It still exists. It still exists when I talk to individuals in chapter saying, yo, I did 5, that's enough. That's more than any other chapter in like my region doing, right? That happens. But at the same time, there are also others saying, yeah, I did 5, now I want to do 10. I did 50, now I want to do 80. I did 50 last year, but I'm still going to deliver 100 exchanges next year in AIESEC United States. But that balance, I think, needs to become, that gap needs to become a lot more.
In the first 90 days, if you're elected in MCP, how do you tangibly make AIESEC a household name?
In the first 90 days of my term, or in the first 20 of my term? In order for the first 90 days to work in a way in which we can make AIESEC more externally relevant, the groundwork needs to start now. And that's what I would be spending time on. Like trying to figure out, okay, I'm talking about event attendance, I'm talking about being at TED events, at Ignite events, I'm talking about making more recognized at university events. How do we get there? I want to do that research now. I would want to create a bunch of individuals who would be excited about this opportunity and figure out what are things that need to happen. What are things that we need to do? What are the kind of events that we have easy access to? What are the kind of events we have alumni at, we have connections at? Do that research and make sure we have a clear plan. This is the kind of event we want to be at, and then make sure that we. That's one of the easiest ways, or one of the ways in which household name, I don't know if it'll definitely become a household name, but definitely a more externally relevant name and a recognized name than we are right now.
Last question, can you answer?
Cool. So considering there isn't a lot of things in place for LEAD beside Dados, how can LEAD become something that LCs develop themselves?
So the first thing we need to do about LEAD, which I think we started this year, was to identify what LEAD means. And what do we want, what elements of LEAD do we really want to implement, and what is the LEAD that AIESEC United States needs, right? So at a local level, it would be identifying, when you're talking about LEAD, what are things that you want to do? Do you want it to be more management level? Do you want it to be more skills? Do you want it to be more for the inner journey? Like once you identify those things, then you try to see how can you deliver it. Right? You have to first figure out what is it that you want to deliver. And yeah, there is one resource, and there are other resources and other individuals and other organizations that can help us, or other organizations like ours, in terms of leadership coaching, in terms of providing these trainings. We have to identify what our need is first, in order to then decide what we would actually implement. So at a local level, what first I would do is identify, again, as I said, what are things that you want to deliver through LEAD, and then work backwards from there to see, okay, if I want to deliver, say, 5 skills training sessions in the first semester, what are things that I need? Are there resources that we already have? Is it enough to get someone from AIESEC, or do we want to invest in getting someone else outside AIESEC? And then I'll be more than happy, I'm sure other LCs, the global network, as well as the MC, would be more than happy to work with you to see what resource can we invest in, what resource exists, because it will be easier for us to find them, as opposed to every LC individually finding them.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, everybody take a seat for a second. Alrighty, hold on, Phil.
That's 5 o'clock. Yeah.
Okay, so right now is the break time. At 5 o'clock, we have LC time, and then at 5:30, the closing speeches begin. So please be on time for closing speeches. I don't know, some of you guys are using this time differently in your LCs, so check in with your LCP probably to see how you want to use the time before and when they want you to go change for later. So you guys are now dismissed. Thank you guys very much. It's 4:20 right now. Where?
Yeah. Really well, man. Instead of time, let's go to the back. I'll go back.
I live stream.